Got safety protocols? Grainger has the safety pros to call. Shop our vast inventory of safety products at Grainger.com. Call, click, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Hello guys and gals, me Mutahar, and today we're looking at the curious, very evil case of P. Diddler, P. Diddles. Now, you might be like, whoa, who's that, Muta? Well, the real name is Sean Combs, but you might know him as P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, whatever. Ladies and gentlemen, he's a man that pretty much needs no introduction in the world of hip-hop and the world of music, really. A man that has several businesses, putting him near billionaire status, okay, if not actually a billionaire. Number might have dropped recently, but we'll get to that later. He's a guy that literally has been the subject of numerous lawsuits, and as of last month, the guy literally got arrested, ladies and gentlemen, over some serious trafficking charges. So you might be like, Muta, why do you have interest in this case? Well, A, it's a pretty popular topic, so literally avoiding it is not necessarily a thing. You constantly see it everywhere, and honestly, the parallels that I've seen over here kind of remind me of cases and things that I've looked at in the last couple years on my channel. It's a pretty scary case, and it really shows how people that have the power this guy does absolutely, at times, can abuse it to their advantage like this and seriously cause some actual harm as they go along. So obviously, let's start off from the very beginning of the situation. So this whole thing started off with the Diddler getting sued the first time, November 16, 2023, where a actual former girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, ended up actually suing the guy for alleged years of abuse. So with the entire situation's already coming up, a serious allegation, about a day later, it ended up actually being settled and resolved. Now, nobody knows the terms of these deals because obviously this was settled over here, but then it still wasn't the end. A few days later, the guy literally also gets sued again. The Diddler gets sued by a pair of actual lawsuits, apparently both in the same actual day. Now, in one of these lawsuits, an individual known as Joy Dickerson said that at the time she was a 19-year-old student at one of the universities, Syracuse University, where apparently she was actually intentionally drugged by her. Okay, allegedly this happened. And of course, bad things occurred right after that. And obviously the other lawsuit, where they were identified as Jane Doe, said that she and her roommate returned to Hall's home with him and Combs after a music industry event in 1990 or 1991, and they were coerced into actually, having sex. So it is insanely a wild situation to witness, right? Like, multiple lawsuits end up coming out, and obviously it's because of this, like, he has to make some statement, and the statement pretty much involved in him going, listen, obviously I, deny every allegation over here, and that's pretty much how things had moved forward. Obviously that's what somebody's going to do in this situation, because admitting any wrongdoing is seriously opening yourself up to getting screwed, not just by this one lawsuit, but maybe possibly other lawsuits down the road. It's what you expect anybody in his situation or in his, wealth class to kind of do. So at this point, Diddler's net worth was basically going up in flames, as many of his brands were kind of kicking him out. One of them was Revolt TV, the digital media brand, where they were like, bro, we literally do have to cut ties with this specific individual, right, when it came to, Sean Combs, or P. Diddy. So he said that they basically stepped him down from his position as chairman at Revolt. 18 actual companies cut their ties with his actual business venture when it came to e-commerce. And let's not forget the canceled Hulu reality television show, Diddy Plus 7. I don't know if they're going to rebrand it to Diddy Plus 7 allegations, but, time will tell. So anyways, ladies and gentlemen, at this moment in time, a music producer ended up coming out, one of his music producers. So Lil Rod, or Rodney Jones, ended up actually filing what they claim is conspired with Combs in an alleged RICO enterprise, okay? So racketeering, these kind of cases, stuff that you probably hear about when it comes to the actual mob. So what they had said was this involved Universal Music Group, its subsidiary Motown Records, Combs' label Imprint Love Records, UMG Chairman CEO Lucian Grange, former Motown CEO Chairwoman Ethiopia Haptamariam, and of course, Combs' chief of staff, Combs' kid. Federal RICO cases, which are based on the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, traditionally used to target the mafia and drug cartels, are brought to more effectively sweep up members of alleged crime rings. Notably, the ongoing Georgia criminal case against Young Thug, so this is again in reference to an actual, different rapper at the time. There's a lot of RICO enterprises that have kicked in, and you probably heard them in relation to certain rappers, especially when those rappers might actually be involved in real fucking gang activities, right? It's their designed to take down a potential suspected criminal organization ring. And it doesn't have to be something out of a movie. It literally can be just a group of people that have conspired together to commit alleged criminal actions. So after all of this stuff is kind of happening, a couple of months later in March, his entire homes in Los Angeles and in Miami ended up actually getting raided, okay? So the feds sent over an entire task force. From what I understand, this was Homeland Security and the Federal Bureau raiding his entire mansions. So you can see right over here in this footage, they've got like all of the trucks ready to go. It literally looks like it's about to be from a fucking Ready or Not mission, where they're raiding like the Diddler's mansion in it. And they're ready to go, right in the house, grabbing everything that they possibly can and understanding if this is something. Because after all these allegations are clearly made, it literally got onto the attention of law enforcement agencies, and they clearly jumped in to see if this was actually, a case of human trafficking. Now, when it comes to things like human trafficking, one of the reasons, again, why I wanted to make this video is because, for me, this kind of harkens back to two specific cases. One that I looked at several years ago, not several, but a few years ago, and one that literally I looked at about a month and a half ago. So to give you an idea, ladies and gentlemen, when it came to actually understanding this, when law enforcement say human trafficking, to give you an idea based on the actual U.S. government, the DHS, they refer to human trafficking as the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain some type of labor or commercial act. Every year, millions of men, women, and children are trafficked worldwide. And it actually is very true, including right here in the United States. It can happen in any community, and the victims can be anybody. Traffickers might use the following methods to lure victims into trafficking situations. So one of them can be violence, one of them can be manipulation, false promises of well-paying jobs, or a romantic relationship. So for a lot of people that think like trafficking is where people put a gun to somebody's head and tell them to get into a van and they'll never see their family again, that's just one aspect of it. It can literally be as simple as, again, lying to somebody to move across state lines, to leave the country, just so you can coerce them into, again, either forced labor or, again, any kind of disgusting activity that you're doing with them against their will. It doesn't necessarily have to involve a gun to somebody's head. It could literally be them, moving by actual fraud, okay? Or somebody can use methods like the lover boy method that was talked about with Andrew Tate, where somebody makes a romantic relationship, brings a girl somewhere across, and basically makes them beholden to their lifestyle, themselves, and in some cases takes away their passports or means of autonomy, which, they can use to then escape a bad situation. That's pretty much what it goes for. So what traffickers look for in these situations are people with psychological or emotional vulnerability, economic hardship, which, remember, these 2 points very carefully, because when we're talking about in later terms, when it comes to people that are typically, sex workers, commercial ones, there are a lot of people that ultimately are in that business because of economic hardship, and there might be some psychological or emotional vulnerability, a lack of a social safety net, meaning that their families or people might not be as present as they necessarily want them to be. So these three are very important points to remember, right? So the reason why this is very similar to something like the, trafficking hub case that I looked at a long time ago is, with the trafficking hub case, there were a lot of these websites that were on those adult websites, like as partner channels that people would go to watch adult content. And some of those actual groups, one of them was Girls Do, Porn, who were actually, alleged to be trafficking these women, or again, making them do acts on camera under false pretenses. Whether they were lying about the distribution of these movies, or, they basically coerced and basically hushed them and forced them into actually signing paperwork, right? It was a massive case, and it was one where the actual company, the parent company of one of these adult websites, admitted that they profited from actual trafficking. So based on an actual press release by the United States DOJ, they said that they were basically receiving proceeds of trafficking and agreed to a 3-year monitoring period. So earlier today in a federal court, ALO Holdings, also known as
Being a CEO means being a collaborator and a nurturer.
Don't you have to be at work?
Everyone is just waiting for me to buckle under the pressure.
Is now a good time to introduce the interns?
Yeah. Hey, how'd you get that dog to calm down?
I gave it a cookie.
You always have cookies on you.
Why, do you want one?
Who decided to make me a part of that mentor program? You have 7 minutes.
So, how did it start?
I see myself as a...
Power-hungry personality?
You think that's what I am?
I think you like to be told what to do. Sorry, I didn't mean to. That was incredibly inappropriate.
Your behavior is unacceptable.
Is it? If we're gonna do this, we need to set some rules that you and I both agree on.
Did you order this?
Starting with I tell you what to do and you do it.
And if I don't?
Get on your knees.
No. What?
Get on your knees now.
I'm...
Is that what you want?
You're very young. I don't want to hurt you.
Hurt me? I think I have power over you. Because I could make one call and you lose everything.
Oh, I told you. I was not gonna end you.
Toronto, Canada has a meager crime rate as compared to other cities and even countries. That's because the community is ready to step up and help others in need, especially in terrifying times. For instance, in mid-2016, a man was saved from getting attacked by a hammer-wielding assailant by his young neighbor. But just a year later, there wouldn't be anyone who could save a 22-year-old Tess Ritchie, and she would ultimately meet her very tragic end. Tess Ritchie was looking for a way to distract herself from a terrible and recent breakup. So she decided to meet a friend at a bar for a night out. Little did she know that she was about to be driven straight into the hands of death. The case of Tess Ritchie is a prime example of evil being in plain sight and how two events separated by just 1 year can coincide on one fateful night and cause utter devastation. Tess Ritchie was born on November 30th of 1994 and grew up in North Bay, Ontario, Canada. Tess was the youngest of 5 daughters and the apple of everyone's eye. Being the youngest, according to her sisters, she was spoiled rotten. But despite being the family princess, she was an extremely down-to-earth, humble, and caring girl. She wasn't afraid to speak her mind and had a very generous, outgoing, and cheerful personality. Tess was an avid animal lover. Her 2 dogs, Phil and Pearl, were her life. And can we just pause for a second and acknowledge how great of a name Phil is for a dog? I gave my tiny dogs a grown man's name too. And this is Carl, and Hank is in the other room. But anyway, Tess was a loyal and very protective person of the people that she loved. She also had a green thumb, and she loved to plant trees and had a vast collection of houseplants. She also worked as an assistant manager at the local Days Inn in North Bay. And when she turned 19, she moved to the metropolitan city of Toronto, with dreams of pursuing a career in service and eventually traveling. Tess wanted to work as an air hostess in an airline. And when she moved to Toronto, she enrolled in the flight services program at Seneca College and graduated by April of 2017. After graduating, Tess applied to multiple airlines and even upscale hotels to get her dream job. She also juggled several part-time jobs, including working in a Toronto coffee bar. Tess, still waiting to hear back from the airline job she applied for, decided to pursue another career on the side, and that was related to languages. Tess learned Italian and was seeking job opportunities as an au pair in Italy, which is basically a live-in nanny situation. Tess, being an ambitious young woman with lots of dreams, also started a YouTube channel, and she primarily talked about her experiences of being in abusive relationships, advocating for women's rights, and she even posted some music cover songs. Tess was a fierce and strong woman who wanted to create a safe space for women in the same boat as her, women who'd survived difficult relationships. Tess wanted to help others and wasn't afraid of sharing her vulnerable experiences with her online community. The last video Tess posted on YouTube was on February 23rd of 2014, and it was about being in a relationship with an abuser. Even from the video, you can tell that Tess was a mature young woman who knew what she deserved. Her way of addressing such an unfortunate and life-altering topic was inspirational for other women. All in all, Tess was a beautiful young woman with so much to look forward to. In November of 2017, everything was about to change for the worse, though. And Tess was about to experience just how vile and sinister some people can be.
You know those moments that you never want to end? Maybe they don't have to. Smart Wool was born to make the world feel.
On November 23rd, 2017, just a week before her 23rd birthday, Tess was going through a rough patch in her life. She'd recently broken up with her boyfriend, Julian, and was feeling understandably down. Knowing that her family, especially her sister, would be there for her, Tess went to visit her older sister Rachel in Midtown Toronto on November 24th, which was a Friday. Rachel was Tess's source for comfort and support. Rachel wanted her sister to start feeling better again, but since the breakup was still fresh, Tess was inconsolable. She wasn't eating, and Rachel had to persuade her to eat something, anything. Rachel tried to pacify Tess by talking about the breakup with her, distracting her with shopping and spending some much-needed quality time together. Rachel also cheered Tess up to some extent by taking her to her favorite place, the dog park. Tess was feeling a lot better, and she was even cracking a smile and laughing, which Rachel was relieved to see. Rachel and Tess spent the majority of the afternoon together because later that evening, Tess had to meet up with an old high school friend named Riley Simrad. Fast forward to about 11:30 p.m. Tess called an Uber to go meet up with Riley. She said goodbye to Rachel, who saw her sister running down the stairs to catch the Uber. Little did Rachel know that this would be the last time she would ever see Tess again. Tess had plans to meet up with Riley at a downtown drag bar called Cruise and Tangos, located on Church Street. And when she arrived and was waiting for Riley to show up, Tess texted Rachel at around midnight to let her know that she'd arrived at the bar safely. Now, this was something that the sisters would do a lot. Tess, being the youngest, was always looked after by her older sisters, and they'd made a pact to let each other know where they were, especially if they were going out alone or at odd hours. After receiving Tess's text, Rachel was at ease and just let her enjoy her night out. The following morning, on November 25th, Rachel texted Tess at about 8:45 a.m. to ask about her night out, but she didn't get a response. Now, Rachel wasn't alarmed or scared at this point, as she knew that Tess had a long night and that she probably was sleeping her exhaustion off. But when 6 p.m. approached and Tess still hadn't heard back from Rachel, this began to worry her, and she was prompted to check Tess's movements through a Fitbit account that the sisters shared, and the Uber account that was linked to their mother as well. When Rachel saw Tess's activity on the Fitbit account, she was very concerned and very confused. She found out that Tess had walked about 300 steps at around 3 a.m. Rachel then discovered an Uber ride that was requested at around 4 a.m., but what's so confusing is that this was canceled by the driver, suggesting that Tess likely never made it home. All of this information terrified Rachel to no end, and 22-year-old Rachel was reported missing on that same day. Now, Canada is a relatively safe country, and its crime rate is way less than that of the US. So it was alarming for the Toronto police to see that a young woman had gone missing with such bizarre clues left behind. An official investigation was launched, and the investigators knew that time was ticking away. If Tess was out there in danger, then the police had to find her quickly and return her safely to her family. But that wouldn't happen. There were very limited leads in the case, and as hours turned into days, the Toronto community felt even more anxious and scared for Tess. Tess's family, including her mother and sisters, also joined the search. On November 27th, almost 2 days after Tess was reported missing, her family made the 4-hour drive from North Bay to Toronto with flyers in their hands to join the search for Tess. They were holding on to the sliver of hope that Tess would be found alive and safe. And meanwhile, detectives also searched the Church Street and Wellesley area, but there was no sign of Tess. After 4 long days of searching for Tess, which was the equivalent to an eternity for the Ritchie family, Tess's mother, Christine, and her friend discovered something horrible. Something that a mother should never have to witness. On November 29th, just a day before Tess's birthday, Christine and her longtime friend, Anna Brazo, a nurse at St. Michael's Hospital, decided to look around the Church Street and Wellesley area again, as this was the obvious place where Tess was last seen. They reached a house that was closed for renovation, with a narrow stairwell that went to a basement door, about 2 doors down from where Tess was last known to have been. While walking past the building, which was actively under construction, something caught Anne's eye, and she stopped to look at the end of the staircase. She immediately noticed a woman's
sorry about that.
Kalen Schlatter was a 21-year-old man living with his parents and younger brother in North Toronto. Friends, neighbors, and family described Kalen as a sweet and caring young man. He didn't have a criminal record, and in fact, he was considered a town hero. A year prior to Tessa's tragic passing, Kalen had saved his neighbor from being attacked by an assailant with a hammer. He'd heard a scuffle between a man wielding a hammer and his neighbor, and when Kalen intervened, the attacker took off running. The local TV station even interviewed the man about his helpful efforts to keep the community safe from crime. After the phone call, the police called in Kalen for an interview, which he went to with his parents and his lawyer. But Kalen's behavior took a complete 180. As he was uncooperative and even refused to give his DNA. Well, it turns out that the police didn't have to struggle for it, because Kalen's own parents would unknowingly help them out. See, Kalen's parents had brought their son some water and snacks, and Kalen even took a couple of swigs from the water bottle before discarding it. The police retrieved the water bottle and sent the DNA off of it for testing. About as simple as it gets. A couple of days later, they hit a jackpot. Kalen's DNA matched the DNA found on Tessa's body, putting Kalen at the scene of the crime and holding him accountable for whatever happened to Tess. Kalen was immediately arrested and held in a cell. And this is where things get very confusing for everyone. Kalen was considered to be a gentleman in the community. So why was his DNA found on Tessa's body? Well, looks can be deceiving, and something very dark lurked beneath Kalen's happy and chirpy facade, which would soon be uncovered. Kalen's cell was located beside that of two other criminals who were actually undercover cops. They were disguised in hopes of getting a confession out of Kalen. Well, Kalen wasted no time in revealing a lot of disturbing details about himself. Kalen boasted about his charm and claimed to be a ladies' man who knew, quote, how to seduce women. He also went on to brag about being with over 40 women despite his relatively young age, which was extremely alarming if it's true. Kalen's phone was also confiscated, and it revealed a lot of dark things. It turns out that Kalen was interested in some incredibly violent sexual acts, and watched loads of, well, explicit videos. This revelation was further solidified when Kalen's ex-girlfriends were questioned. Now, I'm not going to get into the details of what they revealed to the police, but they confirmed that he had some very unique interests, some of which were violent. If that wasn't eerie enough, a closer look at the bar's CCTV footage showed Kalen present at the bar at the time Tess and Riley were asked to leave, meaning that he may not have met the girls at the hot dog stand, as detectives originally believed. He may have been stalking them. The footage showed Tess and Kalen a mere shoulder's width away from each other, which is so creepy to think about in hindsight. Even though Tess and Kalen didn't interact inside the bar or even know each other beforehand, one thing was clear. Kalen had his sights on Tess at that point. Kalen also confessed to the undercover cop that Tess was alive when he left her at the staircase, but he soon changed his story and said that he was inebriated and didn't remember what had happened that night. With all of this information, on March 21st, 2018, the investigators upgraded the charges on Kalen from second degree to first degree. Finally, almost 2 years after Kalen was arrested, his trial was scheduled for January 12th of 2020. Kalen's attorneys argued that Tess's attacker was someone else, even naming this person in court, and they stressed that Kalen had nothing to do with Tess's passing. But the prosecution was 2 steps ahead of the defense. They'd already questioned the suspect in question, and he was cleared of any suspicion. Kalen also took the stand in court and explained the reason why his DNA was on Tess's body. Kalen claimed that he and Tess bonded over their mutual breakups after meeting on the street outside the bar, and Tess was highly engrossed in the conversation, so much so that she even ignored a phone call during that time. But the prosecution slammed this story shut very quickly, because Tess's phone records showed no incoming calls on the night of her tragic attack and passing. So Kalen was essentially lying, but he wasn't done. Kalen proceeded to claim that Tess had initiated the flirtatious advances, and the two had kissed for a bit before Kalen, well, got excited, and he claims that this is how his DNA got onto Tess's body. But there was no evidence to support this claim. During his confession, Caitlin claimed that he invited Tess to his house, but she refused, saying that they couldn't go any further, and asked Caitlin to leave, which he did. He repeated the fact that Tess was alive by the time he left, but the prosecution didn't believe Caitlin's web of lies because if Tess were alive at that time, then she should have gotten into the Uber, which was canceled by the driver because Tess failed to show up. It was suspected that Caitlin had somehow convinced Tess to go into the dark alley and that he then tried to make advances on her. When Tess refused, this hurt Caitlin's ego, and he proceeded to then subdue Tess, take advantage of her, and ended up strangling Tess with either a soft cloth or his cloth-covered forearm, which could explain why there weren't any ligature marks on Tess's neck. The prosecution also showed the jury the amount of surveillance footage, along with the statements of Caitlin's ex-girlfriends. The prosecution also called another witness, a fellow cellmate of Caitlin's, from a Toronto correctional facility, where both men were held in 2018. The cellmate, known publicly as E.S., testified in court that he initially felt sorry for Caitlin, as he was a young man in jail for the first time. But as time passed, E.S. started noticing very bizarre things about Caitlin. Caitlin would cry himself to sleep, but not due to the guilt of robbing a young woman of her life. Rather, it was because he didn't want to serve a long sentence for killing Tess, and that he missed his mother. What was even more maddening was the fact that during a tearful testimony delivered by Tess's sister, Rachel, who expressed feelings on seeing Tess for the final time, Caitlin was listening to everything with a calm and stoic expression, and his face was devoid of any emotion. Caitlin was terrified to tears of having to face consequences for what he did to an innocent woman, but he didn't even flinch when Tess's sister was breaking down in court, reminiscing on the final moments with her sister. The cellmate